when my last tetanus shot was, but I can tell you when my next tetanus shot's gonna be. On today's second episode of my AMC CHambler, as I'm calling it, we're gonna work with the wiring and see what I can do to try to get it at least crank over and start if I'm lucky. This thing has an interesting backstory. Definitely watch the first video if you haven't watched it yet. There were a lot of creative choices made with how this thing was built, wired, and all the other subcomponents. It's definitely going to be a series worth watching. Like, share, subscribe. Let me know what you want to see. Like I said, I've got a ton of vehicles. I'm always open to suggestions. If there's something you want to know about a specific car, I can definitely take a look at it for you and put it on video. Thanks. Gonna give it a once over under the hood and see where we're at and see what we're gonna have to do to start with to just try to get it running. Factory AMC parts from 65. He did graft in the stock radiator from the Cherokee. Engine controller just sort of hanging out. Some of this stuff is in strange places. Not really sure why some of these things are routed and positioned the way they are, but I do have two other Cherokees I can look at to compare it to and see if I can fix some of this stuff, get it routed a little better, try to make sense out of it so I can have a clean place to start. Fuse panel on the passenger side front. He did mention he had was going to relocate the battery. I'm gonna have to go through and see where everything is. Try to make sense of all this stuff. It's the main harness. I'm likely going to have to pull a lot of this back out and away and figure out where I'm actually at as a starting point, because this is kind of a mess, and I also need to figure out what, if anything, is AMC wiring. Bag of smokes. Might be a little hard to tell, but that's the stock AMC firewall. That is the grafted in Cherokee firewall. And there's attempted spray foaming. Two sections to seal them, but that didn't work too well. These are all things I'll have to look at and address. Oh look, that's right behind the engine. So as a point of reference for the wiring on my 65 Rambler, here's my 2000 Cherokee. And a Beagle. Battery, fuse box. Wiring comes up back and around. He sort of has it laid out the same way. I think I can probably just clean it up and it will be better. At least more accessible anyway. So I decided to see what I can do about trying to make sense out of some of this wiring. Pretty much hopefully just pull it to one spot and then maybe relay it out, and it might make a little more sense. It'll also give me hopefully a chance to see where some of the other things are routed and correct what has to be corrected. Also take a look at the steering gear, because there's some strange angles going on there. So this stuff appears to be the factory Rambler parts. This was the speedo cable. Fries are done. You routed the wiring under and in between. I'm not real full, and that line is dented like crazy. So I'll likely have to address that, because that's a leak waiting to happen. So it's got some grounds. Oh wow. Try to get you in here. So part of this main harness that runs up to the computer is stuffed down here between frame and steering shaft. It's just wadded up, so I guess I'll be taking that apart. Try to unplug the computer and get the wiring routed back out. I'm gonna take this ground off. That'll allow me to take the connections off here and hopefully route the wiring back up so I can get back to a starting point and figure out where everything's at, which I probably said 5 times now. Disconnecting this one connector. Hopefully I can route this harness in between the master and the strut tower. Like sticking your hand in a blender. You cut this open and we'll pull the rest of it out. Now I have to get it off my hand though. step one done. Following that harness back, this appears to be the transmission controller. It's not meant to be exposed. Neither is this harness. I'm gonna have to likely unbolt this stuff and move it and then peel everything back to one spot, figure out where it's all coming through and where it's coming from. I just noticed that the oil dipstick is broken off in the tube. That's gonna be fun. Gonna unbolt this connector. There is so much stuff jammed back here, electrical connection wise. So I had to disconnect all this stuff that's jammed in the back corner here. Wrapped around the tube for the transmission dipstick, helicopter. And hopefully I can undo this engine block ground and get some of this cabling back to a point where I can actually figure out where the hell it's going and where it needs to be. I was able to trace more of the wiring, get the sensor connector for the, well, what would have been a distributor. And unfortunately the oil sensor took a crap, but I think it was broken before I got to it. I was able to get this cable out from behind where it was pinching in there. This stuff is factory AMC from the appearance of it. I decided my best bet is to move the fuse box. I was gonna unbolt the brackets and then I realized that it's basically zip tied in place. I'm gonna cut the zip ties and pull this out of the location it's at. And I'll take the bracket off and see where I'm at from there. I think if I move everything back, I may be able to get a battery here, but I'll test and see. Peel all this tape off the end of the fuse box and see what's hiding underneath here. Mostly just some crusty terminals. So we're inside the driver's area on the passenger side, below the glove box. So I'm gonna end up taking some of this paneling off to give me better access to see what's actually back there. Again here, like I've shown you before, you're only trying to drill the head of the rivet off. You're not trying to drill through the body. These are soft aluminum, so they might be a little bit of a problem. Save that one for later, I guess. They're just aluminum rivets, it's not remotely structural. Tetanus shot was, but I can tell you when my next tetanus shot's gonna be. Peel all the rivets off of this. Hopefully it'll come off. No. Let's give this panel a shot. Look, you can see the outside. With those three panels out, get a better idea of how these were joined together, or lack thereof. Try to get some of this wiring back in here and then figure out a way to get it back out into the engine area correctly. Come in here and free up as much of this as I can so I can drag it all back in like I've been mentioning. Some lays it tight as well. screw. And the plan is to pull this stuff back in, try to reposition it all, and in worst case I can make a panel or something in here. But I can also figure out what I can do to close this area off, which is kind of hard for you guys to see. It's doable. It's a little crazy how it was done, but it is fixable. All this stuff is leading to me having a better chance of actually getting it running, which is still the main goal of all this craziness. I figured since I've already gone this far, I might as well go a little further. I'm fairly sure this type of spray foam is actually a fire hazard. It might be hard to see, but that's the brake line. Kind of just jam the hell in there. Just keep pushing as much of the wiring back into the opening as I can, and I will try to redistribute it in a position where it makes more sense. Pop the stud for the oil dipstick tube off, which is also the ground. It takes an E-Torx. It's going to hopefully kill two birds with one stone. I need to reroute some of the wiring, and I also need to get broken dipstick tube out. Sorry if all you're seeing is the back of my hat. So I was able to get all this wiring up over and around the trans dipstick. Now I pulled the broken oil dipstick out and I'm going to put the tube back in. I've got my dipstick covered and all the wiring back in, so I'm gonna go into the cab and kind of figure out where I'm at. I take this ground screw off so I can clean up and pull the tape off the wiring and see where I'm at. Pulling the tape off the ignition reveals this cable, and there's still a lot more to go. I'm glad I stripped all that electrical tape off because I found a lot of cut wires. I still have a little bit left to go, but I'm getting kind of to where I think I am going to be to figure out where everything needs to go. And then I'm going to try to trace all the colors down and see what's what. Hopefully terminate them correctly or remove them. I might depen this afterwards, but at least right now I want to get them out of the way. A lot of them are capped off on both sides. Some of them aren't, so I'm trying to figure out exactly what's going on. This is the pile of tape after removing it from the harness, at least back to the factory stuff. I should have pulled this panel when I was doing this before, but you know, I believe I have what needs to go back into the engine area, or at least be connected into the engine area, and what needs to stay in the interior sorted out. So I'm going to try to put the stuff I know back, hook up some of the grounds, and make sure everything reaches where it needs to reach, and then I can start focusing back on the interior, because this is a freaking nightmare. Trying to think of a name for this thing. I think I'm going to call it either the CHambler or the tetanus shot. There's a reason I'm wearing gloves. They do act like another layer of skin. Spaghetti, spaghetti, spaghetti. Should be everything underneath here for now. I can go open the engine and try to route everything correctly and then get it laid out, and we'll be back to this. Engine ground is back on. All my connectors are back together. I'm still gonna have to get another sensor connector for this thing, which is the oil, should be the oil pressure. The previous owner modified this stock bracket and it's not gonna work anymore. I had this bracket off a TJ I'd parted out, and I enlarged this hole and bent this tab over so that it'll fit right here and bolt it up. So this area is basically cleaned up until I decide how I'm mounting a battery, or at least getting a battery connected to test it out with. I'm going to move on to the driver's side. Notice a couple things. He has nothing for provisions for brakes, either lights or rear brake lines, and nothing to connect the headlights to anything. This is the Cherokee headlight connector, so I might just find a set in the junkyard just to have the wiring, because I can probably piece together to work with this. Figure it out. This is the fuel pump wiring. I'm gonna run it towards back and see if I can plug it into the fuel pump so you take the tank out, since it's just sitting in the trunk. It'll be entertaining either way. There's the fuel pump harness. I'll have to figure out how I'm routing it once I get kind of everything in place. I'll put it up under the seat for now, I think. This little broken switch is actually for the brake indicator. It allows your brake lights to work. I'm gonna try to get this stuff up, kind of living where it should be. That's the OBD2 connection. I'll be tackling running the harness back to the fuel tank. I ran the wiring for the fuel tank down inside the interior. Now we'll fish it into the trunk. I have basically everything in place to try and start it now, at least in the interior. Everything will get rearranged once I know where we are and where we stand and what I'm gonna have to update or modify. A quick trip to the junkyard, and I got a couple things I'm gonna need, like a dipstick. Go in your hole. Whoa! We have a lot of too much oil. Tiny bit of gas, mostly burnt oil. Got a cap for the end of this. I'm gonna have to modify it just a little bit in this corner to fit here temporarily. I did find two of them, so that'll work out. And I was able to get a junkyard battery, which should hopefully fit in here. This is the smallest battery I could find. It still had more than 500 cold cranking amps, which is hopefully gonna be enough. It just barely fits in here. A little massaging and it'll be fine. But I can at least get it in here to try and start it. This is a stock cover. This is the one I modified to fit where it needs to fit. I need to make a quick battery tray for the Rambler. And I don't really have a lot of thicker material laying around, and all the battery trays that I have, which are a couple surprisingly, are too big. But I do have this TJ Wrangler spare tire carrier. So I'm gonna modify this to make a battery tray out of it. My original idea was to try to put it here, but it puts the battery too high. So what I'm gonna do is modify the bracket some, and I'll be able to put it in this general area and it'll give me actual space. So I'm gonna cut this line and it'll give me a flatter space for the battery. I've got the battery in position, and I'm going to terminate the ends and connect the cabling. Ground strap, put an end on it so I can ground out the negative cable, and then we'll put it together and see if it lets the smoke out. I'm going to strip this cable back so I can put it into this crimp and make the ground. I'm not going to need very much of this to extend the ground for the negative. I'm just using the cutter to trim the cable. I'm going to use the razor knife to take the shielding off of it. Cut a piece of heat shrink for it. We're going to end up doing the rest of the wiring on car. Time to start reconnecting the battery cables. I don't have enough large heat shrink tubing, so I'm going to tape these what amount to temporary connections up so that they don't arc and do any damage. And this is powdery. Not the makings of a strong ground cable. Now pick a clean spot, drill a hole, and mount that ground. Battery ground is hooked up. So this is a stock 2000 era Jeep Cherokee ignition on my Rambler. It's been, kind of messed up and broken off to try to make it work, but I don't have the right key for it. And none of the keys I have, which I do have several Jeep keys, will work. To be able to change the cylinder, you need to be able to turn the key and activate this little button right here. Well, I can't do that. Well, unfortunately, with both of those pins depressed, I still cannot turn this without having the correct key. I'm going to take the componentry off it and take this with me, and I'll likely have to drill out the button. I might be able to get it from inside, but I doubt it. The fasteners on these components are tamper-proof Torx. So apparently this just falls right out if you take the screws off. I think I just had a spring go flying, so look for that when I get the back part off. I'd likely have to release these two white clips in here. Got our ignition system off. This actually turns the activator in there. Now I have to find that little spring that apparently flew off, landed here in the video, and then disappeared. So I'll just spend the next 30 minutes looking for a spring I won't find, then I'll magically find it in a month after I've already bought another part. Just as I was getting ready to tear the seat apart, I found it on the floorboard of the passenger side. Oh, it took me 5 minutes. Let's see what we can do about drilling this SOB out. My goal was to show finally getting this out, and then I did, and this fell out, the piece fell off, and the spring fell out. Oy vey. I do believe if I get this in here correctly, even with it being somewhat broken, I should still at least be able to get the thing to crank over, which is all I should need right now because there's a lot of work left and there's a lot of stuff that's a mess in here. Ooh, it's crusty in there. I'm gonna clean as much of the junk out of the throttle body as I can, just to prevent anything going in the engine. Just did a quick check over the engine bay. I don't see anything that should hang me up, so I'm gonna connect the battery and check the wiring and make sure nothing is going to create a little fire. Check the interior wiring and we'll see if she'll crank over. Well, I don't see anything, and the Although my sense of smell is not what it used to be, I don't smell anything, so we'll give it a shot. I do have an extinguisher ready. It's right outside the door of the car. I'm gonna check the outside real quick and see if anything on the hood is messed up or glowing. I don't see anything glowing, so give it a shot. Nothing so far. I might just jump the starter and see if anything happens. Well, we'll see if it kicks. Or if I have it on the wrong terminal. Okay. Good. Okay, so I know the starter works, I know the engine will turn over. It's just the wiring mess. So now that I know that the starter works, I'm likely going to look into at least replacing that ignition switch setup and probably look into getting a whole nother harness because this thing is so chewed up. I'm not sure if it's worth trying to fix it, if it wouldn't just be easier getting a whole new harness and putting it in. Thanks for watching my second episode on the AMC CHambler. My plans are definitely going to be shifting a bit here to there. I've got plans to fix the frame, I've got some equipment, and I'm going to be getting some steel to actually square it up. I'm likely going to do that first, and then I will rewire the car to get it to run. Biggest change is going to be what's behind me right here. A lot of the parts that I need for my CHambler are going to be coming from my two-door. I always wanted one, like I probably said 1,000 times already. This just is not the one. You'll see why in some upcoming videos on this one. I'm going to take all the wiring out of here, some of the interior components, and also probably some of the frame chunks to fix what you saw in this video. It's going to be a fun project. I hope you stick around. Again, let me know what you want to see. Like, share, subscribe. There's a bell somewhere. Ring that as well. Thanks very much. See you on the next video. Bring.